All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
Hey, good morning, everybody. It's the Mark Thompson Show. Mark Thompson is not here, but Tony and I are, so that's pretty good. Hey, Tony.
Morning.
So much to talk about, so much going on today. Mark has left us a great interview with a man named Bob Christian, and he is a candidate running for the House in Georgia. And he's talking today about the way elections run in Georgia and some differences. And so it's a really interesting interview. We've got David Katz, former federal prosecutor, now a defense attorney in Los Angeles, in to talk about some things. And I was noticing today, apparently, former President Trump is interested in delaying the sentencing in his hush money trial until after the election. Seems to have worked so far, so we'll talk to David Katz about that, see if it looks likely to happen. And then we'll talk to this author who's written a book, and this man is incredibly accomplished. He's a Fulbright scholar, a Google scholar, very accomplished in the world of AI, and he had this idea about what would happen if an AI candidate ever ran for president. And so he wrote this satirical book, and Mark will have an interview with him. We'll talk about that as well. So a lot of fun things. And a lot of politics to talk about as well. Because the message, Tony, is really economy, economy, economy. So tomorrow, Vice President Kamala Harris is supposed to come out and talk about her economic policies. Yesterday, the same was true for Trump. He was going to North Carolina. He was supposed to stay on message. He couldn't really quite stay on message, but he did talk about the economy a little bit. And political analysts are saying that this is the subject that could win him the election if he could just stick to the message. Here's what he has to say about the economy.
Record.
If Harris wins this election, the result will be a Kamala economic crash, a 1929-style depression. 1929. When I win the election, we will immediately begin a brand new Trump economic boom. It'll be a boom. We're going to turn this country around so fast.
Okay, so he did talk about the economy a little bit. It's being called Kamalanomics, kind of a mouthful, instead of Bidenomics, right? Kamalanomics. And we'll find out more exactly about what she plans to do to lower prices, to help families, middle-income families, as she has talked about, to thrive, because people are being saddled with all kinds of higher costs. But he couldn't stay on message, and he kind of sank back into the insults, back into the she's stupid. Let's see it, Tony.
Now they're putting her on the covers of Time magazine. Her running mate, he wants tampons in boys' bathrooms. What happened to her laugh? That's the laugh of a crazy person. This incompetent socialist lunatic, the worst vice president in history. Kamala, you're fired. Get out of here. Go. Get out of here.
It doesn't work. It's like voters have told him via the polls right now that those attacks are old and tired, and people care more about hope and the issues than they do about these personal attacks that he's launching into over and over again. So if he can put that on the back burner and not go down that ranting road for a hot second, perhaps he'll have a chance at catching her in the polls, because right now it seems like she's really, really running away with it. So she's set to talk about the economy, and he does a little bit, but right now what we know is this, that she is ahead in many of the swing states, and now in Florida as well, by 1 point. But that's really within striking distance. This Fox News poll was done between August 9th and 12th, And it shows Trump and Vance with 50% support and Kamala Harris with 49% support. So it's a 1-point lead. It's unchanged from the July of 2024 poll, which was taken before President Biden stepped down from the campaign, which showed Trump leading Biden 49% to 48%. So it does improve, though, the numbers with over third-party candidates, because in the latest poll, Harris and Trump are tied with 45% each, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. follows with 6% when he's included into this hypothetical matchup. It's interesting. People are still voting for other third-party candidates. Cornel West and Jill Stein and Chase Oliver each get 1%. These votes could change, and so there is room for her to overtake Trump in this type of a poll. RFK Jr. is on a steady decline. I think more and more people after that Bear story are thinking, I don't know if I can vote for him. Yeah. In this poll, they asked voters who they trust with certain issues. And this is really where our divide is. Registered voters trust Harris to do a better job than Trump on climate change. That was 57 to 39%. Abortion, 56 to 40%. Healthcare, 54 to 40%. Uniting the country, important, for 50 to 45%. And Supreme Court nominations, 50 to 47%. Though they trust Trump more on the issue of border security, 58 to 39%, immigration, 56 to 42%, foreign policy, 52 to 45, and the economy, 52 to 46, crime, 51 to 46, and guns, 50 to 47. So that's where that's where I guess our split is. The poll that takes a look at the national average, not just the swing states, not just Florida, was taken by The Hill, the publication The Hill. And in this poll, they say Harris leads Trump 48.1% support to 46.5% support. If they add in other candidates, it's even a bigger lead for Harris, 47.4 to 43.3. They asked more than 1,100 registered voters, and the margin of error here is 3%. So those polling numbers are interesting. I think it's also interesting that voters are telling Trump to back off of these personal attacks, that it's not working for people. And I just don't think he happens to be listening. As a matter of fact, we even have now these groups that are forming. I don't know if we've seen this before, but they're, you would think evangelicals and Christians gravitating toward Trump. They want to put the 10 Commandments in the classroom. They want to shove religion down your throat. It seems like perhaps that's where you would gravitate. But no, there are reasonable Christians among us. And there is now a group called Christians for Kamala. And they're growing in number every day. Not to mention Republicans for Kamala. They had this huge phone call. 73,000 people reportedly participated, raised all kinds of money. This video is a little bit long, but I thought it was interesting the personal stories that are relayed as to why Republicans would be switching to vote for Kamala Harris. Let's take a look, Tony.
Start here at the table. I was really struck by what the former lieutenant governor of Georgia had to say. I don't know if we have that soundbite of him, really just like talking about like, what do we want our kids to remember us for? You were on that call yesterday. What was it like being on a call full of Republicans, but who are supporting a Democrat?
It was amazing. I'll be honest. I mean, it was such a privilege. I moderated the conversation. And it was so powerful. And I would say something that gave me hope for the first time in a long time about the Republican Party's future was the responses that were happening in the chat as this call was happening. Just hearing from Republicans across the country, one of them who said, I have voted Republican my entire life. I've been voting Republican since Reagan, and I am going to vote for Kamala now. And I mean, I think to me, I think what people see in Kamala Harris is traditional values that we all look to, right? I mean, it's traditional values for America. It's the values of, protecting our individual freedoms, standing strong as America for America's democracy, standing strong with our allies internationally. I think those traditionally in the past, Joy, were, I would say, conservative.
What Republicans ran on.
Yes, back in the day.
Yeah.
It was incredible. And the stories and the conversation and the speeches people gave, I think were very personal. Like Rosario Marin, she served in the George W. Bush administration. She was the 41st U.S. Treasurer of the United States. And she spoke about what it was like, she's a Mexican-American, and what it's like to see all these ugly narratives about immigrants and minorities in the country that she sees in the Republican Party today, and how that's not the party that she identifies with.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it's what's interesting about it is, my buddy Michael Steele, he says this all the time, and I ask him, why are you still in the Republican Party? Like, why did you? And he always says, I'm not leaving, they should leave. Because, there has been this sort of metastasis inside of the Republican Party that has eaten it up and turned it into Donald Trump. Donald Trump used to be a Democrat. Like, way back in the day, he wasn't even a Republican. He didn't like Ronald Reagan very much. And he's sort of eaten the party alive. And people who, we've talked about this offline, who they don't even like the guy. Republicans on Capitol Hill, but they've let him eat the party. And it is fascinating to watch people. They're not calling themselves ex-Republicans. You guys weren't ex-Republicans. You are the core of the party saying we want our party back.
Yeah, and to me, I think that's what's amazing about our country. This is an organic grassroots movement that's growing, right? Well, I would say that Republican leadership has failed us as a party because they continue to pander and fall back in line with Trump and enable him, the worst of the worst, instincts of his in this party. And it's so damaging to the Republican brand. But you're seeing now a movement that is saying enough. And if you're not going to take a stand, we are. And we're going to back a candidate that we believe in and support. And, we'll see what the future holds for the GOP.
The country needs two healthy political parties, and it would be nice to have a normal Republican Party. We can just argue about tax rates and stuff like normal.
Right. Thank you, Tony. That's good. When your party starts to organize against you, when your own party starts to organize, that's when your message is not landing. There's a problem. And so, again, with the Republicans for Harris, with the Christians for Harris, I think it's indicative of the tide turning. And I don't know if Trump standing up, as we saw a few minutes ago in North Carolina yesterday, and continuing to do the same tired thing. She's stupid, she's this, she's that, blah, blah, blah. Nobody cares. Nobody cares about that. It's the same old song and dance. It hasn't worked for you then, and it's just not working for you now. Did you see, speaking of RFK Jr., though, and his place in the polls, that he's kind of playing both sides of the field? He apparently reached out to the Harris campaign about some type of administrative role or cabinet position in exchange for his endorsement, him dropping from the race and endorsing her. And there are reports that he met privately with Trump, and possibly for the same reason. I guess maybe using his candidacy and endorsement potential to shop around and see who offers him the better cabinet position. And maybe that's why he ran all along. One wonders, because he didn't really have much to offer the American people. And he didn't really seem to care any time a story that was embarrassing came out about him. So he did this and duped the people that would vote for him for his own personal gain, is what it appears like right now. I mean, to tell the people that are voting for you, they're putting their support behind you. They're giving you their vote. I consider that to be an honor and a privilege. And really, the whole time, you're just shopping for a job for yourself. Yikes. That's the latest with RFK Jr. We'll see if anybody offers him a good deal. I hope Kamala Harris offers him no deal. None at all. Whoever offers him a deal, that says a lot about that campaign, right? Yeah. Well, and if Trump will offer fossil fuel companies basically the environment on a silver platter in exchange for oodles of money, he'll probably sell a job to RFK Jr. as well. We'll see. Keep your eyes on that one. There will be a vice presidential debate. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz agreeing to this debate. It's set for October 1st, and we'll see how it goes. So put that on your calendar. October 1st, Walz versus Vance. How do you think that's going to go? What, America's dad versus America's anti-cat lady guy? We'll see how it goes. I don't know. There is a story about the way in which Democrats are rising to fight back against Republican attacks. And from what I understand, the Democrats are expected to intensify their attacks on Project 2025 in the coming weeks. So that's a strategy we may see from the Kamala Harris campaign. They've got a task force that they have put together to fight Project 2025. The project is led by several Democrats, including my congressman here in the Bay Area, Jared Huffman. He launched this opposition task force in June. He says things are being very integrated and that all the people on the task force are working together and that this is going to be a very big part of the Democrats' argument and strategy discussions. So in the next 85 or so days, we're going to be hearing a lot more about Project 2025. They had this email last week that the group sent out challenging each lawmaker to hold at least 5 district events exposing the extremism of what they're calling Trump's Project 2025. Trump has tried to distance himself from this, but Vance wrote the foreword for the leader of the group's book. And really, as much as Trump tries to distance himself from Project 2025, he's all over it. So that'll be interesting. The argument, according to folks on the task force, is that they want to hold these folks from the Heritage Foundation and in the Republican Party accountable for their positions. It's a compilation, they say, of Republican policies, and they want to remind all of the voters where those people stand, that these are the positions Republicans have been supporting, and that this is what is at stake in the election: our rights, our freedoms, our democracy, our future. And that really is the message that has been working so far, because people are starting to see that. So listen for more about 2025 coming up as well. Something interesting politically related. When Hillary Clinton was running for president and she got hacked, all the news media ran the story, right? Ran the secret information. But now, media outlets are not running information from the Trump campaign, which also got hacked. Google is confirming that Iran-linked hackers targeted the Trump campaign and targeted the Biden campaigns. They targeted the personal email accounts of about a dozen people affiliated with President Biden and former President Trump. And we know it looks like they got into Roger Stone's email, and a bunch of information was sent to media outlets. And I think, as they should, because the information was gained in an illegal fashion, they didn't print it. They said no. There's a Google cybersecurity team, and they say, yes, that the information has come from hackers. The Google Threat Analysis Group said this group, APT42, it's a hacking group associated with the Iran Islamic Revolutionary Guard, targeted the personal accounts of people affiliated with Biden and Trump. That included current and former U.S. government officials and people working on the campaign. That Google blocked numerous attempts by APT42 to log into the personal accounts of these folks. They notified the campaigns. They referred the case to law enforcement. So, interesting. Another case of people affiliated with other countries trying to stick their fingers into our elections and meddle with things. And here it comes again. Yeah. We go online, to deviate from politics for just a moment, and we buy a lot of things. And a lot of us will look at the reviews for things to see what other people have thought. You do your due diligence before you make a big purchase. But a lot of those reviews we know are fake. Now the Federal Trade Commission is banning fake online reviews and testimonials. They announced yesterday this final rule that bans online fake reviews and testimonials and allows the agency to seek civil penalties from known violators as well. They say fake reviews waste people's time and money and pollute the marketplace, diverting businesses away from honest competitors. So they're going to strengthen their toolkit for fighting these deceptive, what they call advertisements, even though they're reviews, because that's really what they are. To protect Americans from getting cheated, put businesses that unlawfully game the system on notice, and promote markets that are fair, honest, and competitive. Will it make a difference? And how do you prove that it's a fake review? That maybe someone got paid or got a perk for putting up some information for a product they may or may not have even purchased. We'll see how it goes. I don't know. Okay, so Mark left this interview for us with a man who is running for Congress in Georgia. He's a really interesting guy. He's a Democrat. His name is Bob Christian. And he has some things to say about the election process in Georgia and how possibly that could relate to some things that are going on across the rest of the country. It's a really good interview. Let's give it a listen.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Who's Mark Thompson?
Everything is going extremely well.
What he's got going here is a situation.
You people are crazy.
You just don't get it, really. You don't.
I cannot believe it.
It's fantastic.
Thompson, party of four.
What are you doing?
You cannot say you love your country.
Sayonara, sucker. Good day, sir.
Why are you yelling? Seriously, what the
I'm so excited about this guest. We talk so much about Georgia. I think so much about Georgia. The redistricting, the court cases, the voter suppression. And I was mentioning this to someone the other day. And they said, well, you know, my friend is running for Congress in Georgia. Maybe you'd like to talk to him. Are you kidding? I'd love to talk to Bob Christian, who is running for the U.S. House to represent all of Georgia's 7th congressional district. Put it together for Bob Christian, everybody.
Hey, Mark, thank you so much for that. It's you mentioned right off the bat, I wanted to touch on, you mentioned the redrawn maps. The reason I'm in the 7th district this cycle, because I'm a two-time nominee. I ran for the 6th district last cycle, and this is my 3rd congressional district in 3 congressional cycles. I was moved from the 9th to the 6th, and that bothered me so much that I decided to run for the 6th. And I'm going to take full credit that they redrew the maps again, because I pulled almost 40% of the vote as an unknown Democrat. So I know what I'm saying is resonating with people. So they redrew the maps again, and now I'm running for the 7th district. And so it's been it's one of many parts of their plan here in the state. But lead in with the questions we had talked about it. You said
no, I'm so glad to be able to talk to you and at least address that right out of the chute, because I do want to get to you and some of the positions you've taken on policy and exactly what's involved in trying to win public office in Georgia. I have to say, I used to know so many people in Georgia, and I feel as though through the years they've all kind of melted away. So it's great to actually connect with a Georgian who can speak in real specific ways about the different ways in which Georgia seems to have tried to elude the people's voice. Gerrymandering, redistricting is obviously one of the ways you can entrench power. And then I really want to talk to you also about voter disenfranchisement, because I think that's a real contemporary issue. And I feel as though Georgia's kind of taken it to high art. So wonder if you can first speak to the redistricted maps. Now, there were because, and by the way, for those who are saying, well, I don't live in Georgia, this applies to all of us, because this redistricting and gerrymandering goes on state to state, as everybody knows. But what was going on in Georgia was real court cases that were contesting the way the lines were drawn. Can you just bring us up to speed briefly on that?
Obviously, in 2020, we had the census. In the middle of the pandemic, the census was very difficult to carry out, and it created population changes. And that's what maps are drawn off of, is the results of that census. And so here in Georgia, they drew a map that changed the districts around. They moved some of the minority population specifically, but it's always a chess game of where we can move Republicans and where we can move Democrats. And usually who's ever drawing the map tries to draw them in their favors. Republicans have been running the House down here, have been running the legislature down here for 20 years now. And so those maps become more and more and more entrenched as red districts versus blue districts. Well, when they redrew the 2020 maps for the 2022 election, across the state, lawsuits were filed saying, look, one, you've illegally moved minority populations around. Two, you're actually illegally moving the map around. We don't think this is the right way to do it. And it was found to be an unconstitutionally drawn map. That was the ruling that was made by a judge, but he made it so close to the 2022 election that they went ahead with these maps anyway. And now, as we come to 2024, we've got brand new maps, and they moved entire districts around. You never would have thought just moving a number on a map would have created such confusion. But like I said, I ran for the 6th district last cycle, and I'm north of Atlanta. My district extends up into north rural Georgia. And now suddenly the 6th district is in eastern urban Atlanta. So they just moved the number 6 across the map and kind of changed that around that way. And it created a lot of confusion among voters, among candidates, and it really threw things into a loop. And that's kind of where we're falling out, because currently the candidate that I'm running against is the incumbent for the 6th district. So he is the current representative in the area that we're all in. And then when the new Congress is seated, when I take this seat from him, that's when the 7th district will come into existence. And so we're running for a seat technically that doesn't exist yet.
Wow. Wow.
And it has led to a lot of confusion.
And one of the things you said in that was just astounding to me. I remember when it happened, which was we're realizing, or we're ruling on this so late in the game, that let's just use these crappy maps that we've just ruled are crappy and completely biased. We're going to still use them, though, because it's just too late to change maps. So in a way, we established the poison, but we were unable to legislate the antidote in time.
Well, exactly. It's and we're seeing that play out in this cycle as well with the election fraud cases that are happening around the country. We've got one here in Georgia where the fake electors and the false ballot applications. And we're seeing that being delayed and delayed and delayed by a series of court cases and challenges and rulings and amendments and all of the if, nots, and whats that go into it, that we have several battles around the state between strong Democratic candidates and election deniers who filled out false paperwork, committing what I think is a crime, but we can't get that judgment because our court systems process things incredibly slowly. And so I don't think we're going to see a trial in that regard on the elector cases here in Georgia prior to the election, meaning that it's very possible that we can elect people to office who are under indictment and may still be found guilty of alleged crimes that they committed during the last electoral process, which in my mind would make them ineligible for office, but it will lead to stronger or, more and more court cases is all that's going to happen.
Well, and it just feels as though that's part of the game as well. Those delays, those court cases, that's all part of delaying the inevitable, which is a loss in the case of the GOP in many places. Now, Georgia, you can give me a real sense of it. It's a state that's changed a lot, right? The urban centers tend to lean center left, I guess, or Democratic districts or Democratic dominance tends to sort of float to those places. Give me a sense for the rest of Georgia and your 7th congressional district, which is, as you say, I didn't realize this, doesn't really exist until you'll take office. But is that north central part of the state? Where is that?
North Central is a great way to put it. It extends up in the northwest. The farthest north county is Lumpkin County, and people probably know Dahlonega, Georgia, home of the first gold rush in the United States. It's that area up in there, very rural. This summer we've had a lot of black bear sightings. That's how very rural the area is. And but they've got a solid, small core of Democrats, but it is a bright red county, and so it's going to take a little bit of time to flip Lumpkin County. I live in Dawson County, which is in the middle of the district. It's kind of become that urban area that people are leaving the city to get into the countryside from, but we're now the fastest growing North Atlanta metro county in state of Georgia, and we border on Forsyth County, which is one county closer to Atlanta, that was the fastest growing county in the United States of America during the last election cycle. So that change is coming out of the city, and because of the huge expansion of jobs available to Georgians under the Infrastructure Act, we're seeing a lot of people come in to the region that had not lived here previously, and it's changing. It is changing very much. We've got several seats in Forsyth County at the local level that are becoming flippable, that are up for grabs. We're going to see some blue shifting as we get a little bit further north now. The 7th district, as itself, it is still an incredibly challenging district. I have an opportunity to win it, and I'm taking full advantage of that opportunity, but it's going to be a close race. It's not like I'm going to run away with it. And the honest answer, when I win this race, it's going to shock everybody because it's listed as an unwinnable race.
Oh, that's just wild, Bob. That really is. And the infrastructure bill, you mentioned it. It's obviously the effects of it have filtered down, as you suggested. I'm wondering if the connection between Democrats and that infrastructure bill has also filtered down at all to that deeply red crew?
Not so much. And part of that is because in our district, the current representative, Dr. McCormick, has requested $0 for 2 of the fastest growing counties in the state. He has actually proposed and passed no legislation directly related to his district. He has not received any appropriations money for the area. And it's going to make it difficult because we are a smaller rural area as you get further north in the district, yet we are some of the fastest growing regions. For instance, Dawson County has 1 high school still, and that's awesome. It brings that small hometown community feel to everything. But at the rate we're expanding, we're going to need to start planning and building out our school system, our emergency support systems, our medical systems, our fire systems at a rate that we have to build those faster than the rate of growth, or else we'll lose all those services effectiveness. And the tax base that exists in Dawson County is not enough to sustain that growth. So without an influx of money from federal programs, from state programs, I don't think we'll be able to keep up. And our current representative is just not interested in bringing that money into the district because of whatever reasons behind it all, but it's money that's there. It's our tax dollars that have left the state, and I really feel like our representative should be doing the best he can to bring that money back to us.
Of course. I mean, and you speak so well about the urgency of, with an expanding population, getting those things in place. And, sometimes those are tough political battles to win because people don't see them necessarily as immediately helping them. It's like buying the new reservoir out here in California, and people don't really want that. Yeah, but can't we use that money now for something now for me now?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the big pushback. Like I said, in the southern end of the county, it's very urban. We've got North Metro Atlanta specifically, and then it moves into a lot of urban buildup that's coming in, suburb style living. But as you cross into the north, it does become more and more rural. And as you get into the northern counties, what you hear a lot is we don't want the growth. We moved out here to get away from all of that, so we don't want it to come here. And so the first fight you have to have is convincing them that growth is coming. No matter what we do, we can't put a barrier up at the county border and just say you're not allowed in here. It's coming. And part of the reason it's coming is because as you move further north, housing becomes more and more affordable. Housing is an entirely different conversation for a different day, but it's part of what's driving the growth is that we are building affordable housing. But like I said, the more people you have, the more need you have for medical services and all the infrastructure, internet services, digital services, police, fire, and medical. All of that needs to be put into place, and then there needs to be a road structure that supports that. And there are billions of dollars that have already come to Georgia and billions of dollars still available to come to Georgia. We just need somebody to go and get it. And that's part of my platform, is helping us build to sustain growth and do it in a sustainable way. And on the other side, we get crickets when we talk about what's happening with the growth here in North Georgia.
I want to get to the voter disenfranchisement in a moment, but I want to talk just for a second, follow up on something you've just said, which is associated with a compelling message. Like, you've just mentioned these things in the last 90 seconds, and I think, gosh, these are imperatives that I would think voters would really spark to, but they have to hear them. And I'm wondering, is Bob Christian on enough? This is one of the things you know so well. I was mentioning it in relation to who was the guy? Who was the guy who lied all the time? You got me the
Trump?
No.
Hey, Mark, it's George Santos here.
Oh, George Santos. That's right. Thank you. So I was mentioning, when he phonied up the resume, or there were certain huge holes, like gaping holes that clearly just couldn't be true. I was saying that when you run for Congress, oftentimes in some of these smaller districts, the big local news stations in New York City, in the case of George Santos, they don't really cover it. And so you can kind of get away with it until you get the seat. So similarly with you in this district, it's a smaller district. I'm wondering if you're getting any real media heat, because it's like, again, one of those races maybe that the media doesn't pay as much attention to. And so the message that you have, which is so compelling, never really gets out there in a big way.
To an extent, that's true. Like I said earlier, this has been labeled as an unwinnable race. And like everybody else, media has resources, limited resources that they can put in regions. And so when they get that ranking that says, that's going to be too tough a fight, there's not a lot of coverage that comes up that way. And through the first half of the season here, from the beginning of the year, we declare as candidates in February. So from February forward, I was working with my base, securing the Democratic votes in the area. And then when we went through the change at the top of the ticket, there's been an entirely different atmosphere. Within 2 days of that, they were opening a Harris campaign office in my district. I got to speak on the same platform as Governor Beshear, so there was news coverage that came in for that. We did have the state election board shenanigans, which I'm sure we're going to talk about in a minute. And we also had a big fiasco over an African-American AP Studies course here in the state. And I got to participate in a lot of that, get in front of some cameras there. And that started to spark. It's, no one was more excited than me when I got the phone call saying Mark Thompson wants you on his show. So it's like, I cannot thank you enough for this opportunity. But last night I spoke to a national organization called Defense for Democracy about the danger to our public schools. Next week I'm doing a veterans forum with some veteran candidates here that are running for Congress in North Georgia as well. So we can talk about the impact of Project 2025 specifically, but what it means to be a veteran in this new governmental environment that we live in. And so that coverage is coming. And as we get closer, we're 88 days away from the election, even closer for early voting. As we get closer and closer to that election deadline, we're going to see more and more coverage in the area. I think we've got opportunities for 5 candidate forums coming up in the next 30 days. And so the coverage is coming. But the honest answer to your question is the first 6 months of this was tough. There was not a lot of attention being paid to what was going on.
And it's just so sad that you need money to, get the word out, and these are all sort of systemic issues, I'd suggest, with American elections, but that for another time. Let's get to Georgia specifically. You guys are getting headlines for what is, I think it's a high art going on in Georgia, which is the ability to disenfranchise so many voters at one time.
High art is a great way to put it. I've always told people that we are the laboratory for the MAGA branch, for the extremist branch of the Republican Party. They're using Georgia to see what they can get away with. What can we pass? What are the challenges that we're going to face? How are we going to fight the lawsuits that eventually erupt from that? They're using our state as their learning platform, and they're quite honestly doing a damn good job with it. They've made it easier for individuals to challenge any voter. And in Forsyth County, one of the major counties in my district, they've had 69,000 voter challenges since the 2021 cycle. And out of those 69,000 challenges, only 214 people were provisionally challenged from being on the rolls. There are outside groups, primarily True the Vote, based out of Texas, that are providing individuals within the state AI-generated lists that they've compared off of national databases, such as the change of address database. And they're using that, just the fact that somebody changed their address, as a reason to declare them not being on the poll or on the or the roster. And here's the thing. My nieces and nephews, they changed their address because they went off to college. They still live here in Georgia, but they want to get their mail where they're hanging out. And that's not illegal. They're allowed to do that. It's not illegal to be registered 2 places. It's illegal to vote in 2 places. And so they've made it easier for folks to challenge. There's one man submitting lists that are 12,000, 17,000 strong. And that bothers me, because I'm a firm believer in one man, one vote, or one person, one vote, I should say. And it sounds for all the world like that guy's one person with 17,000 votes. And that's an anathema to me. That's so against our democratic principles that it bothers me immensely. And now the state has made it even easier. One of the things that we're well aware of here in Georgia, and I don't know how much this got reported across the country, is in addition to all the shenanigans that are making the news, they just launched in the last couple of weeks a website to where they want to try to make it easier that if you move away, you can take yourself off the rolls yourself. But all you need to remove somebody from the rolls is the last 4 of their social, their date of birth, and their first and last name. And anybody can go to the website and put that information in and hit the button and have that guy potentially removed from the rolls. And the first hour of the day that it was launched, anytime you typed in a name, it automatically filled out the rest of the data.
Oh my God, that's just incredible.
Yeah, so it was this huge security glitch, and they got it fixed. I mean, to their credit, they identified that immediately. They brought the site down. It was only compromised for about an hour or so, but we live in a technological era. We know how much damage can be done with a digital device in an hour. And so we're not seeing a lot of results from that. But the fun side of this is that the first person that was challenged was Brad Raffensperger. And some wag out there was just like, you know what, I'm going to show you how bad this was. And then the second person that was challenged was Marjorie Taylor Greene out of the 14th district.
That's just wild.
Mark, it works real quick, because it's a felony in the state of Georgia to falsify voting records. And so now you're going to use the Brad Raffensperger challenges and Marjorie Taylor. They're going to try to track down those people and charge them with felonies. And so apparently it's okay for us to just take random people off the roll, but dear God, don't attack the leaders.
Oh my God, what a mess. And this is enabled by a legislature and then a governor, et cetera. I mean, even Secretary of State, that is disposed to this thing that it's the dance that Georgians have been doing for so long, which we've just described, which is just getting people off the rolls so that there's never really the people's voice.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's now, like I said, there are legitimate reasons to remove a person from the polls, and Georgia has a pretty good legal system in place to identify that. The polls get purged once a year by the Secretary of State's office in a very regulated and controlled fashion. And the primary reason people get taken off their votes or have their voter eligibility challenged is they haven't been participating in the last 2 presidential cycles. That's 8 years worth of voting here in Georgia, and if you're not participating across that long, then they just kind of assume, okay, let's clear that guy out of here.
Sure.
It's a process that works incredibly well. The concern that people have on the other side is it's not keeping up with the number of folks that should be removed. Unfortunately, in their opinion, the number of folks that should be removed are all Democrats. We haven't seen a focused effort to remove Republican voices from the rolls. And so it's very hard to consider that when they say, well, we're just making sure that it's all honest and fair. It's like, yeah, sort of. And that it's just not the case. And they prove it every single time they pass one of these new laws. They made it easier this cycle for one person to challenge thousands of voters. They made it easier for the state election board to do the kind of things that they've done, which they just recently reopened a 4-year-old investigation that's been settled twice. Because, Mark, you've probably got better research staff going on there than I do. I challenge you to find the last time a presidential candidate identified 3 state election workers by name in a rally speech.
You're right.
I don't think you can.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so this is a plan that they know all the way from top to bottom, and they've got willing actors across this state and many others. And that's what concerns me.
Yeah, this is happening, and again, it's not just Georgia, but it is happening in Georgia, and Georgia certainly, as I say, they are on the gold medal stand when it comes to disenfranchising voters, and I mean, illegally disenfranchising, or inappropriately disenfranchising voters.
I think illegally was the right word.
Illegally was the right word. And then we'll move on, I promise, but just to follow up on this on the legal side, there are the legal challenges to these various moves. Are they exhausted, or they're just excruciatingly slow?
They're excruciatingly slow. It's there is not a lot we can do to change the law as it comes to allowing people to challenge votes until we flip the House. So to get rid of those laws, to stop these insane voter challenges at the levels they're coming in, Democrats actually have to take seats in the House, take seats in the Senate, flip the legislature, and pass new law, because those have been passed into law, signed into law by the governor. And so it takes changing the law to get that done. There are a couple of lawsuits pending against the website. In fact, the NAACP here in the state just filed a cease and desist letter in the beginnings of filing a lawsuit against the existence of the website they just opened. We're waiting to see how that plays out. I don't think the state's going to cease and desist. So I think the next step is going to be a lawsuit that's filed. The good news is we get 45 days away from the election. You can't do any of this stuff anymore. That's federal law. And the other good news is that federal law has a higher level of protection, and a lot of our county boards are going to default to federal law when it comes to those rules and say, look, we have to, you're right, we have to obey the law, but federal law succeeds state law, and so we're going to follow the federal law. And so we've got good people on our boards, we've got good people trying to stop it, but I think we're going to see a lot of certification delays, and I think we're going to see a lot of judges saying, you have to do this, you don't have a choice.
For those who are looking in and concerned about Georgia for top of ticket issues, meaning the presidential election, do you see that dance going down with the fake elector folk who are now in control of certification or other aspects of essentially delivering the vote, the actual vote, even as troubled as it might be? Do you see that as an emerging issue, or is that being amplified? Too much is being made of that on in media reports that we're seeing out of Georgia?
There is a bit of application of it. I mean, obviously, you hype it up to make it a better story, but that is an emerging issue here in Georgia. It's very much we're going to see problems in the Fulton County system, not because of anything that Fulton County does wrong, but because that's where they keep chipping away at that trust. That's where they keep saying, like I said, they just opened a 4-year-old investigation so they could relook at the investigation that's already been investigated. They just said that board members can refuse to certify elections if they conduct a reasonable inquiry, but they don't define what reasonable inquiry means. And legally in the state of Georgia, through the law and through historical precedents, this is a must thing. It's written in the law as you must certify, and you must certify within 5 days. And it has been continuously for almost 100 years, really, judged as the oldest case of this happening in Georgia was in 1899 in Coffee County. A county board refused to certify a local election, and a judge had to step in 1899 and say, you can't refuse to certify, you have to certify. So we have a huge precedence here of the court system supporting the laws, how it's written, interpreting the law the way that it was meant to be. The interesting thing about the Coffee County reference is, if you recall earlier in the year, in the 2020 election, Coffee County was the one that allowed the members of the Trump team, Giuliani and his crew, to come in and copy the databases down there. And yeah, we're still pending and what is it? 70 years later, we're like, oh, look, Coffee County's back. It's
oh my God,
a little over 100 years later. So where it starts, I guess, is where it ends. But it's there is an emerging issue, and I think the bigger issue is we can see it clearly here in Georgia. It's starting to be reported across the country what's happening, and as we open our eyes to all of that, we can see that it's happening in Nevada, it's happening in Utah, it's happening in Arizona, it's happening in Idaho, it's happening in Kansas, it's happening in Oklahoma, Texas, Florida. And so we can see this beginning of an idea that they're having of some way to cause the election to not happen, essentially. Right. Because their ultimate goal is that it gets to a vote in the House of Representatives, this arcane paragraph in the Constitution, Clause 3, that says if you can't certify the election, then the House of Representatives votes with 1 vote per state. And that's what they're counting on. That's what they want to get it to. And that concerns me from a national perspective, but knowing how it works here in Georgia, knowing that our judicial system has been a strong supporter of our free and fair elections, I don't think they're going to get there. But every single time they try to cast doubt on an election that was free and fair and has been proven so time and time again, they chip away at that trust, they chip away at that foundation. And if you chip away at a foundation long enough, eventually the structure collapses. And that's the part that concerns me, is that our constituency is just not going to have any faith in the election process, despite the complete and utter lack of evidence that there's anything wrong with the election process.
Sure, and that's a kind of voter suppression in itself, because people lose faith inappropriately. I mean, erroneously, in this system, even though the system is fine, but they don't participate because they go, well, the system is all messed up, and you don't even really get. Bob Christian's website is Christian4GA7. That's 7th District in Georgia.com. Christian4GA7.com. I mentioned that for those who are listening and perhaps not watching. We have a lot of, this is also an audio-only podcast that then is on all the major podcast platforms. So just if you're listening, it's Christian4GA7.com. So we only have another minute or so with you, Bob, but I did want to get to some of your positions, and I'm curious of the positions that you regularly visit on the stump to your potential constituency. What things land? I mean, in Georgia, like what are the, again, we get it, 5 times removed, that the cultural wedge issues, like everybody's talking about trans kids, you know what I mean? It's as though that was the issue confronting America, These cultural wedge issues, the GOP has had great success with them. I'm curious what issues in Georgia and in Georgia's emerging 7th you see your constituency sparking to.
The biggest one, and I've already talked about it here, and it's actually one of the big things that I make as part of my platform, is the infrastructure needs that we have here in the 7th District. As we get further and further north in the district, we are going to need an influx of federal investment to help us build out our infrastructure to meet the growth. And just the way that I talk about it, it resonates. We want to make sure our children have good schools. Well, we need help building those. We want to make sure that we have strong emergency services so that we can keep control of any kind of crime that may come with the growth, so that we can put out fires that may happen, so that we can take people back and forth to emergency services. Those are the things that resonate, because my big message has always been, for 248 years, we've agreed to disagree in this country. We built institutions that allow us to civilly disagree and still solve problems. And now all of those institutions are under attack. But at the end of the day, I go to the same churches as the people in my community. We go to the same grocery stores every day. Our kids go to the same schools. We drive the same roads. We go to the same parks. We hang out and do the same things. That's what a community is. That's what people coming together to live together do. My neighbor, I call him my fence neighbor. He just recently broke his leg. He's a Trump guy. He's not going to vote. He disagrees with everything that I talk about, but we talk about it, and we talk about it civilly, because we live next door to each other for about a decade. When I'm out of town, he keeps an eye on my house. When he's out of town, I do the same for him. When I was the local sports reporter, I wrote articles about his kids. He just recently broke his leg, and I offered to mow his grass, but I was told that his wife had it done. So but he's my neighbor, And no matter what happens in this election, I'm still going to be living next door to the guy, and we're still going to be going to the same grocery stores and same places in town and talking about the same problems on the local level. And that's what we have to remember, is that we are actually all in this together, because we all want the same things. We just have different ideas of what those things mean. And we used to be very, very good in the United States at disagreeing on those problems, but still figuring out ways to solve it. And I'm worried that that's disappearing. And if that disappears, we're going down a dark, deep path.
Couldn't agree more. Such common sense. The demonization of the other side is a scary thing that's emerging in American politics. I love that you're this voice of common sense. And I love your focus on things that will actually help constituents regardless of political party. And you're not an us versus them guy. I wish you such good luck there in the emerging Georgia 7th. It's Christian4GA7.com, Bob Christian. And I'd love to, I don't know if we can do this, but I'd love to check back in with you, maybe in October.
Oh, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, let's do that and just get a state of the state at that time.
Well, early voting starts October 15th. If you want to do it before that and see where we're at, or if you want to do it slightly after that and see what we got, it'd be wonderful.
We'll do it a little before that and see where we are. And
right. I would love
maybe give you the Mark Thompson Show bump, which can be a very powerful thing in this world. Bob, so excited to meet you, and again for your future. I wish you the best, and I'm looking forward to our next conversation. Thanks a lot.
Outstanding.
Bob Christian,
Thank you.
everybody. Yeah, love that. Love that. Love that. Love it.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It was great. I loved it.
How would you handle this? We could try ignoring it, sir.
Morning.
You cannot say you love your country.
Where are my weed smokers at?
Stay at home and get baked. On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister. This report is sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. There is an event going on underway, the first joint rally with President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris since the president ended his 2024 re-election bid. While speaking from Prince George's County Community College in Maryland, the two leaders highlighted their efforts to cut Medicare prices for popular drugs. President Biden praised Harris as a partner, said she'd make a great president. Harris, meanwhile, is expected to lay out her economic policies Friday during a campaign speech in Raleigh, North Carolina. Former President Trump holding a news conference at his New Jersey golf club in Bedminster today, or Bedminster. The Biden administration has reportedly negotiated lower prices for drugs used by many people on Medicare. The discounts announced today take effect in 2026 and will save enrollees an estimated $1.5 billion in out-of-pocket costs. Drugs included in the negotiated price lowering include Eliquis, Jardiance, Xarelto, Januvia, Farxiga, Entresto, Enbrel, Imbruvica, Stelara, and 2 types of insulin as well. So a lot of medications being discounted there. Former President Trump is asking for his sentence to be delayed. Yes, his sentencing to be delayed. That's in the hush money case until after the 2024 election. The former president's legal team asking the judge overseeing the Manhattan criminal case to postpone sentencing, currently scheduled for September 18th. They argue a delay is necessary to resolve ongoing legal challenges to his conviction, namely the presidential immunity challenge. Columbia University President Minouche Shafik is stepping down ahead of the fall semester after facing criticism from really all sides. This comes months after pro-Palestinian demonstrators protesting Israel's actions in the war in Gaza took over the south lawn of the Morningside campus. In the meantime, Katrina Armstrong, CEO of Columbia University Irving Medical Center, was named the interim president of Columbia University. There are now 5 people being charged in connection with the 2023 death of actor Matthew Perry. This according to the U.S. Attorney's Office. The defendants, 2 of whom are doctors, one, Perry's live-in personal assistant, and also a person referred to by authorities as the ketamine queen, are charged with distributing ketamine to Perry during the final weeks of his life. Authorities say these people took advantage of Perry's addiction issues and they knew what they were doing was wrong. Perry died at the age of 54. You may remember he was found floating face down in his pool. The coroner says he died as the result of acute effects of ketamine and subsequent drowning as well. We have some questions about this case for former federal prosecutor and now defense attorney David Katz coming up. The fight over California's Proposition 36 is brewing as well. 3 ranking Democrats just joined with Republicans in supporting the measure. It is meant to increase sentencing for certain drug and theft crimes. San Jose Mayor Matt Mahan says the key is targeting repeat offenders and focusing on treatment. He's joined by the mayors of Elk Grove and Sacramento. The Sacramento DA, Governor Gavin Newsom, is against Prop 36, saying it'll make the prison overcrowding crisis worse and it will cost the state billions of dollars. Voters will get to decide its fate come November. California giving another 9 communities money to help homeless families. The grants are part of the Home Key program. They'll be used to build 533 homes for nearly 5,000 people. The latest round of funding goes to the cities of Merced, Richmond, San Francisco, and Sebastopol, the counties of Orange, Riverside, and San Mateo, and the housing authorities of Kern and Sacramento counties. Governor Newsom says he'll continue to support local governments working to ensure that everyone has a place to call home. As if we weren't paying enough for every little thing, drivers could end up paying double for their car insurance. California, one of 3 states where prices are projected to increase this year. The company Insurify predicts rates will soar 54% before December. They blame the damage from severe storms and wildfires. 14 states are currently paying more for full coverage, with Maryland the highest at $3,400 per year. The city of Oakland is apologizing to the family of an officer killed in the line of duty. Tuan Lee was shot in December while responding to a burglary. Months later now, his widow was asked to return $461 that he was overpaid during last year's ransomware attack. The Oakland Police Officers Association called it outrageous, disgraceful, and a heartless move, demanding the amount be written off. The city administrator did just that, saying they consider the matter closed and they will continue to support this family. Voters are not going to be asked about a refinery tax on Chevron after all. The city will pull the measure from the November ballot as part of a settlement reached with Chevron last night for $550 million. Richmond Mayor Eduardo Martinez believes it's an easier, guaranteed way to get a hold of that money. He says by standing up for environmental justice, other communities can also require their polluters do the right thing. Some notable passings. Actress Gina Rowlands has died at the age of 94. Deadline reports that she died Wednesday afternoon at her home in Indian Wells, California. They didn't give the cause of death, but she's 94 years old, so she's been battling Alzheimer's disease as well. Rowlands is best known, maybe recently, for her role in The Notebook. Been in all kinds of movies. She retired from Hollywood in 2015. She's survived by her husband and her 3 children. Actress Gina Rowlands has passed at the age of 94. And rock musician and longtime radio show host Greg Kihn has passed away as well. A statement on his official website says he died at age 75 Tuesday after a battle with Alzheimer's disease. He earned his first hit with the song The Breakup Song, which hit number 15 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart back in 1981, following that up with the biggest hit of his career 2 years later, Jeopardy! That peaked at number 2 on the Hot 100. He was also a morning show host on a radio station in the Bay Area from 1996 through 2012. And lastly, Dolly Parton is launching a new makeup line. It's called Dolly Beauty, and it arrives August 22nd. The first collection is called Heavenly Kiss, and it features 4 lipstick shades, including Jolene Red. More products are expected to be released soon. You know what? Dolly seems to do the right thing with all the piles of money she keeps pulling in, so I'll try Jolene Red, absolutely. This report is sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. The best coffee, the best tea, hands down. And they're incredibly wonderful people doing wonderful things socially as well, supporting female-owned businesses in the places where they have their fresh hand-roasted coffee sourced. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. Just for being a Mark Thompson Show listener, you get your 10% off. Go to CoachellaValleyCoffee.com, check the website. If you're a tea drinker or you like iced tea, I'm telling you, this vanilla tea and the ginger mint, you've got to try it. Then when you check out, you put in Mark T all together, Mark T at checkout, and away you go. You see that the money just fly off your total there. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. I'm Kim McAllister. This is The Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Who's Mark Thompson?
Hey, which one of you is Mark Thompson?
It is the Mark Thompson Show. It is Thursday, which means it's one of my favorite days of the week. It's David Katz Day. David Katz is a former federal prosecutor. He's now an amazing defense attorney in Los Angeles. The guy I would always want on my side in case I get busted for something. David Katz, welcome.
Great to be with you, Kim.
Hi. I hope I don't get busted, but you're my favorite lawyer, so you're the one I'm turning to in a crisis. Trump
Thank you for saying that. I don't think you'll ever need me, but thanks.
I'm hoping not. I live a pretty clean life over here. But let's jump into politics because there's some movement now in the hush money trial. For the third time, the Trump team has asked Judge Juan Merchan to recuse himself, and for the third time, Merchan says, no, you haven't presented any new compelling argument as to why I should step down, and so I'm not. And then today I heard that Trump is asking to delay the sentencing in this hush money case, which was set for September 18th, I think, until after the 2024 election. It seems like all these cases keep getting pushed back because of the Supreme Court immunity ruling. What's happening?
Well, this case, you'll remember, got delayed about a year, and people thought this was not going to be the one that ended up going to trial first. But with the 3 Trump-appointed justices on the Supreme Court taking, and many people think delaying, and then ruling incorrectly in the presidential immunity case, you end up with that case in Washington, D.C., federal court not going to trial quickly. You end up with a case down in Mar-a-Lago being booted down the road, it looks like, by a judge who just, doesn't want to expedite it, or even worse, wants to slow it down, not rule on many motions that are pending that it seems like that Judge Cannon down there in the Southern District of Florida could have ruled on. And then you had the fiasco in Atlanta with the prosecutor down there and the special prosecutor being removed, and then this whole issue in the appellate court. So lo and behold, the one in New York City went to trial first. Although it's, on these older charges. We're having a little bit of feedback, by the way, here. And so he's actually delayed it quite a bit. Trump himself, he asked for some delays. He got some discovery he claimed late. That was a fair request for a slight delay. Then the case went to trial over the summer, early summer, you'll recall. And then he got found guilty, by all 12 jurors beyond a reasonable doubt. And so during all that time, he's tried to recuse the judge, Merchan, there, saying that Merchan actually had a conflict of interest, that his daughter works for a Democratic political firm. So now the argument, having lost that several times, and also having lost that in the appellate courts in New York, Trump's latest argument is that, well, with Harris going to be the nominee, the daughter works for Harris. Well, the daughter also worked for Biden, worked for Democratic organizations. It's nothing but a make weight argument. It doesn't really add anything to what they're saying there. And so that was denied. And the judge was a little bit upset. But, what can he do? He sanctioned Trump some money before. He disparaged Trump's lawyers. But, Trump's lawyers are being paid a huge amount of money. From their point of view, being disparaged a little bit by the judge. That's one of the least of the things that happens to them in representing Trump with that huge amount of money that they're making. The other one about trying to delay his sentencing, that's that he wants to brief this issue of presidential immunity. He claims that presidential immunity is somehow implicated in this case. It's important for your viewers to remember that he could have brought that presidential immunity case in that New York State court. He could have said, it violates my constitutional rights everywhere in a federal court and in a state court not to have this presidential immunity argument recognized and validated. He did not make that argument. He sat on it. He sandbagged it. His lawyers brought it up at the last minute. And the judge in New York said, I have a briefing schedule. You're very well aware of it. And you didn't file any briefs on this issue within the briefing schedule. You're just trying to delay things. And so he denied it, I think, on the merits, and also because it was basically brought for delay. Now their argument why the sentencing should be delayed is, number one, they want to brief this issue more now that the Supreme Court has ruled. He gave them some time. You'll recall there was a brief delay so they could brief this issue. The judge is going to say it's been fully briefed. I'm ready to rule. And I think he's going to say that even the broadest reading of what the U.S. Supreme Court did in the presidential immunity case doesn't knock this case out. The facts of it were, this is the hush money case. This is the Stormy Daniels. This is the one that's basically done before he ever becomes president.
Sure.
What he does while he's president is to write some checks in the Oval Office. Writing some checks for a personal debt, for a personal matter that happened before you were ever the president, does not, you could see where it doesn't implicate even that ruling. It's not an official act to go write in the White House a check for something that happened before you were president about something personal. So he's going to rule that that is not a basis to delay the sentencing. I think he's going to sentence him in the middle of September, but I don't think he's going to get prison time or even very restrictive home detention, because I think that would be viewed, given the timing, the way it worked out, the campaign, that would be viewed as presidential as what does he call it? Election interference. I think it would be anything that would really restrict him from campaigning at this point, right? It's just the way it is. People who want to see him go to jail and think that he well merits going to jail, and he's delayed it to exactly this point. And why should he benefit from the delay? If you want to look at it that way, he's going to benefit from the delay. He's not going to get locked up or restricted at his sentencing in the middle of September in the New York case.
Well, if they do delay sentencing, because the way it's shaking out now is the presidential debate is September 10th. The judge will rule on immunity in the hush money case, whether presidential immunity is applicable, on the 16th. The sentencing's on the 18th. And so all of these things are happening for Trump kind of back to back. And I guess one could argue that having a sentencing as the presidential election is so close could sway and influence voters. So perhaps to avoid that whole argument, you schedule it for the day after the election or the week after the election. I don't know what makes sense, or whether there's even any thought process into when the election is at all, that the two things are completely separate.
I think the judge is going to feel like Trump has really made his own bed on this one. If these had really been unavoidable continuances, that would be one thing. But Trump tried to delay this case. It's true that the government delayed this case, asked for the continuances several times. But I just think that the judge is going to feel like, especially if he's not going to send him to either prison or send him to restrictive home confinement, I think that the judge will think, you know what, I'm just going to get on with it. He was found guilty by the jury. I've denied all of his motions. Okay, so he just got sentenced to some term of probation and let's say a large fine. How am I really interfering with the election? And Trump made his own bed by this timing was largely a product, not entirely, but largely a product of Trump asking for delays. And so here we are. By the way, if he were to get prison time or even very restrictive home detention, I think that would immediately be appealed. And I think that they would at least stay, if the judge didn't, the appellate court in New York would at least stay the start of either the very restrictive home detention or him being locked up, because the appellate court, I think, would say that the way it worked out, no matter whose fault it is election interference. If you really were going to remand him to jail or lock him up or, restrict him to not leaving Mar-a-Lago, Trump would play it for all it's worth. I just don't think, having followed a lot of these cases very closely, Kim, as you have, I don't think that's the way it's going to shake out, but I do think he's going to say this is the day for sentencing. There is some chance, though, that he would move it to the middle of November. There is some chance that would happen, the sentencing.
So speaking of Trump, I've been reading a lot of stories lately about how in the past he's laid the groundwork for other things. We saw it with election fraud, right? He said before the election even happened, they're going to steal the election. He kind of, almost willed it into existence in his own mind, in a way. January 6th laid the groundwork for that. And now he's been talking a lot about that Kamala Harris's candidacy, whether it's constitutional, that she switched in after the primary voting. Is there any constitutional merit? Could Trump level any constitutional argument that she shouldn't be allowed to run for president?
No. Even his, even the people he picked for the Supreme Court, you never know. Thomas might agree with anything. And Alito, unfortunately, now has gotten to the point where, I wouldn't bet any money that he wouldn't agree with an outrageous proposition of law. But no, this is, you have to realize that, first of all, it would be very hard for anyone to have standing. The other thing is that, to bring it in a federal court, that particular plaintiff would have standing, even if it were Trump. I don't think that he would necessarily have standing. But the other issue in the case is just that, first of all, it's kind of a political question, how any political party handles their own nomination process. But I think that the campaign finance lawyers, the people who really know this field, would say nothing irregular happened here. He has not been nominated. Biden was called the presumptive nominee. We used to have the smoke-filled room, and the smoke-filled room would pick somebody. I remember when Humphrey and McGovern were in it, the same year that Bobby Kennedy got assassinated. And the nomination, bounced. It went in 68. There was a big issue. It was in Chicago. Then in 72. So all of these things could be decided in the convention. And there's no issue there, Kim. If anyone can tell me what the issue they think is that he would raise, that being substituted in, and Biden could turn down the nomination. He turned down the nomination, and then the delegates are all going to go, and they're going to vote. They can vote for anyone they want to, and they're all going to vote for Harris. He doesn't have a leg to stand on this one, Trump.
Speaking of Trump, he's also decided that he's going to sue the federal government, the Department of Justice, in connection with the raid at Mar-a-Lago. He's still angry over this, suing the DOJ for $100 million. Does this go anywhere?
This goes absolutely nowhere. This is nothing but a publicity stunt. He's going to take advantage of the fact that the district judge that he picked, Cannon down there, that she threw the case out. Her decision is going to be reversed, and it's going to be the special prosecutor is not a suspect, either how the special prosecutor was picked or how the special prosecutor is deciding this case. And so there's just her decision is going to be reversed. But Trump is trying to take advantage of the fact that the Mar-a-Lago case has now been thrown out by a federal judge for the moment. And he's been so wronged. His mansion, his Mar-a-Lago has been invaded. That case will go absolutely nowhere. People say it might end up blowing up in Trump's face, as so many things have been recently, because he would be a civil case. So they can take his deposition. If he refuses to give a deposition, it'll be thrown out because he's not cooperating with his own lawsuit. If he does give a deposition, he's been terrible in depositions. The one that I love was when he said he never met E. Jean Carroll. He didn't know what she was talking about. Then, of course, there's a photograph of the two of them together. Then at the deposition, they show him the photograph and says, "Oh, beautiful, beautiful girl. Who's that, my daughter?" "No, that's the woman who you said wasn't your type, but who a jury has now found that you sexually assaulted in the dressing room at Bergdorf Goodman." So I think he may be, biting off a little more than he can chew, as he often does, and he may end up, he'll drop this lawsuit. It's just a publicity stunt. If it actually went forward, then they would take his deposition, and it would probably be a disaster for Trump to be under oath.
Let's talk about Matthew Perry for a moment. This morning in Los Angeles, we were told 5 people have been arrested in connection with providing him, allegedly, ketamine. The medical examiner in Los Angeles says it was ketamine that led to his demise. He was found face down, floating in his pool, dead at the age of 54. And now we have 2 doctors, his roommate, and somebody called the ketamine queen. And Mark sent me an email this morning saying it's interesting that these people were arrested for providing him drugs, or ketamine specifically, and that's because he was a big Hollywood star, that in normal cases, it's hard to get the drug dealer, that this might not have happened. And so can you talk a little bit about why they're bringing charges in this case and how celebrity and fame may play a role?
Well, I was a federal prosecutor, and now I've been a criminal defense attorney for some years. I do a lot of this federal practice. I know the prosecutors who just announced this. I used to work a lot with the United States Postal Inspectors. They do a very good job, and it looks like they did a very good job in this case, along with the DEA and the local police. LAPD worked on this case too. And you can't bring every case. And so the reality is, when you're in a prosecutor's office, you do want to bring cases that will really increase deterrence. So yes, there are a lot of dirty doctors in Southern California. They do stuff not only by providing controlled substances, but they do a whole lot of shenanigans and frauds with the medical systems, with cheating Obamacare, the ACA, with cheating the Medicare system, the Medi-Cal system. But they also, some of them, like the doctors allegedly did here, profiteer from having access to drugs like ketamine and then selling it out the back door. They've had 3 people in this case, Kim, who pleaded guilty already or agreed to plead guilty. The 2 who just got charged and arrested today are this one who's styled the ketamine queen. They did a search of her residence, and they found allegedly methamphetamine and some other drugs. So she's been charged already. They're going to bring a superseding indictment, I think, against her to bring in these ketamine charges. And on top of that, they have this doctor that they call Dr. P. And Dr. P has been charged. I think the 2 of them have been arrested. They'll be down at the federal courthouse today having their arraignment. Their attorneys will be asking for bail. I don't know about the ketamine queen, especially with her prior case and what her record is. But I would imagine that the doctor, I think he's in his 40s or 50s. He probably doesn't have a criminal record, or he would have been in trouble with the medical board already, right? So he's probably a resident of the community. I would think he's someone who's definitely going to get bail. Yeah. And the trial probably will go in front of whichever judge was picked already, because this is a superseding indictment. Whoever has the underlying indictment would probably be the judge who'd be chosen for this case. But again, you have to make examples when you're a prosecutor. You can't charge everybody. People would love that if you could charge everybody who was really worthy of being charged for a heinous crime, like giving drugs that are illegal, and knowing, if you know that it's illegal, the person shouldn't have those drugs. You do it just to put money in your pocket, and then the person doesn't just have a normally bad reaction, but they die. So I think the public would like to see more of those cases indicted. You can't indict all those cases. In many cases, it's how many resources do you have to find out who was it who gave them the drugs. But when you see cases like Michael Jackson, you remember Michael Jackson? Yeah. That surgery drug, and his doctor went to jail, I think, for involuntary manslaughter. Right. There was a rapper who went to federal prison. There was a case with a baseball player. You remember, it was an Angels player, a relief pitcher, some kind of pitcher. He ended up dying, and the person who supplied him the drugs went to prison for a very long time. So those are the cases that tend to be brought. And so there's nothing like, oh, wow, they only go after celebrities. There's a reason why this case got a lot more attention. And one of the doctors has already either pleaded guilty or agreed to plead guilty. There are 2 doctors in the case. He's one of the 3 who's already pleaded or agreed to plead guilty. There was also like a Guy Friday, whatever you call it, a personal assistant to Matthew Perry, and he's also pleaded guilty. One of the reasons they have so much detail about this case is because they have insiders who are talking. That's why they're able to make the allegation that, for instance, this doctor that they just charged today actually injected Matthew Perry in a parking lot in Long Beach. Obviously, they have somebody else who knew that happened, who's saying that happened. You have to take everything with a grain of salt. Everyone's entitled to the presumption of innocence, but you have such a specific charge. They have the charge that just before Matthew Perry died, he was repeatedly injected with this ketamine, and it was illegal, Kim. He was also on a ketamine treatment, which is done for depression and anxiety. So Matthew Perry, Kim, was on that treatment, but he apparently really liked this ketamine. It became a real addiction thing, and now he's injecting it. This is way in addition. The dosage was way in addition to what he's supposed to get for the ketamine treatment. That went out of your body in a few hours. What was in his body was not something that went wrong with the prescribed ketamine treatment. It was from him getting all of this illegal ketamine and having it injected into his body.
This whole thing is so sad. So sad. Can we turn to this lawsuit? I don't know if you saw this. It's not necessarily a lawsuit. It's Montana's top court striking down parental consent laws for minors that are seeking an abortion. The judge wrote a minor's right to control her reproductive decision is among the most fundamental rights that she possesses, and that Montana has not shown that the law was justified to protect minors. So Montana, they're affirming the right to privacy. They're affirming the right for young women to have control over their own bodies, is what I understand. This is a red state, right?
Right. Well, the slogan of the conservatives and the libertarians, New Hampshire, were things like "live free or die," live free or die. And so that was the normal conservative libertarian position, was that we have the right to do with our bodies, that the government should get off our backs, that the government shouldn't tell us what to do. And apparently all the members of the Montana Supreme Court, because this was a unanimous, kind of see the law in that context. So the fact that they are a red state and they have a Republican governor and they have a Republican Senate candidate who's trying to oust this John Tester, who seems like he's an excellent senator up there. I think that's what Trump was doing up there, trying to help that Republican Trumpy candidate against John Tester, the sitting senator who's running for re-election up there. But it seems like the Supreme Court made a decision, and that will be the law in Montana, as I say, unanimously. This is a little different from parental notification, which I think is still getting kicked around up there in the courts, or maybe through legislation. But this one was, my understanding is, in Montana, a young woman who really needs an abortion can go to a judge and ask the judge, and if the judge decides that she's met the legal standard to get an abortion, the judge can authorize it. And I guess they were trying to argue that no, that was that shouldn't be the law, that shouldn't be the case. And the Montana Supreme Court ruled unanimously that under Montana law and Montana's constitution, that was a young woman's constitutional right to go ask the judge. And if the judge agreed that she should have an abortion, that she could have one. I think that's without any notification to the parents. But generally, that's the issue that we all hear about, the notification to the parents. Don't the parents have a right to know? In some of these red states, they do have this right for the parents to know. And of course, then basically the government requires notification to the parents that the young woman doesn't want to give them, and then they can interfere with her right to control her body in many ways. And they can say, well, the parents did it, not the government did it. But if the government requires the notification that the young woman doesn't want to give, it is kind of the government doing it.
Yeah, agree. In New York, they've banned face coverings, saying the law is a way to target people committing crimes or hiding behind scarves. I'm assuming this also applies to COVID masks or, health care related masks. This happened in Nassau County. It was signed into law Wednesday, just a week after it was passed. So you can't wear a face covering in Nassau County, but they're not the only area considering this type of legislation. The Democrats, even in Los Angeles, New York City Mayor Eric Adams, New York's Governor Kathy Hochul, all considering this type of mask ban. What do you make of this? And is this constitutional? Because if I want to put on a COVID mask to protect myself, shouldn't I have the right to do that?
Well, a lot of it grows out of the pro-Palestinian demonstrations. Right. So a lot of like Jewish advocacy groups have sort of fought for that and exerted political pressure, because the argument is that there's some rally, somebody either acts very abusively or actually strikes somebody, and then you can't identify the person because they have a mask on. And I guess people are going to these demonstrations and they're doing a face covering, and the argument is that it's not for COVID. Either the type of the mask isn't like a COVID mask or
a scarf or what have you. But
exactly.
One could argue that that's a religious thing, right?
Well, it's going to be very hard to try to prove these cases. I think in general, it's going to be a misdemeanor. There's all kinds of selective enforcement, exactly what you're saying. There's also the issue on like the subways and stuff like that. You can't identify the person who, mugged you on the subway because they have a mask on. And again, I guess one of the arguments is that, let's say the police say, you can't wear that mask on the subway. And someone says, wait a second, you're telling me what to do. You're violating my rights. Presumably, this would be some directive to the police, and it would be some cover for the police when the police get sued by the ACLU, that they were acting appropriately under that statute or that guidance, because everybody was supposed to wear COVID masks, and that was its whole issue. And then it kind of got turned on its head. It's like, well, every mask that I have, including a scarf that's covering my face at a pro-Palestinian demonstration where I actually attacked a Jewish person. How much that's really happening, how much this is propaganda, on both sides. But you remember at the universities, and I covered the one out here at SC, SC and UCLA both had issues that were really fraught. They took over a building back at Columbia. The head of Columbia University, she just had to resign her post. And this issue, you remember, was especially around graduation ceremonies around May. This was a huge issue. And I think that's when this interest got started. I'm not sure how much this is really going to go, anywhere.
Okay. All right. Lastly, I know my David Katz time is running out, but they have this, the step they've taken for a pro-Trump lawyer who has gotten now kicked off of the Dominion case because she is the one that leaked the confidential information. She had access to this information and leaked it. Her name is Stephanie Lambert, and a federal judge in D.C. took this step of disqualifying her. She's an attorney in Michigan, and she's an election denier. She's a Trump person. They say she can't represent another election denier in any of these defamation suits filed by Dominion Voting Systems because she shared this and admitted to sharing this confidential discovery document. Is this expected? Has this an unprecedented thing, or is this something that you could have seen coming?
Well, this may seem a little bit inside baseball, but it's sort of a fascinating situation. What happens now is a lot of cases, especially federal cases, have a protective order. And the idea is that you shouldn't disseminate people's social security numbers. You shouldn't, their addresses, all that kind of stuff. And also details about the case. I mean, the idea is that the litigants need to know this, and the litigators, their attorneys need to know this. Sometimes even the litigants are not told it. Only the litigators, the attorneys, have access to it. And then they argue, like I argued in one of my cases. So wait a second, I need to talk to my defendant about what's in the protective order. And then they make it really clear that he's also covered by the protective order. But the allegation against her, and what the magistrate judge found against her, is that she basically entered the case just to spy on the protective order stuff. In other words, her goal in coming into the case was to get stuff covered by the protective order and then disseminate it to the world. As I understand it, she's admitted that she disseminated to the world. She's kind of proud of the fact. And people might say, well, wait a second, I want government in the sunshine. I want all this stuff disseminated. Isn't she a hero? Isn't she like the guy, who was the guy in Australia? Wasn't she like a whistleblower who told the world the truth?
Oh, Julian Assange?
But the federal courts have to operate. I can't speak that much about the state courts. I imagine they have the same arguments. The federal courts have to operate on the fact that you're an attorney, you're held to a higher standard, you have to obey the order of this court. There are things that are going to be disclosed in this case for justice's sake that you have to be able to review to defend your client, and to then abuse that and violate the protective order. I think from what I've heard about the case, she was lucky that the only sanction that she's been hit with so far, the only punishment, is that she's been not allowed to represent her client in that case, or maybe in similar kinds of cases. And the client that she came into the case for is, I understand it, the Overstock guy. And the Overstock guy is in a world of trouble himself. Now his lawyer is in a world of trouble. There may yet be another shoe to fall off her foot, because it sounds to me like what she did is really beyond the pale for any attorney.
It sounds criminal, is it?
It could be criminal. It could be punished as criminal contempt. It could also be, they could maybe appoint a lawyer because sometimes in these criminal contempts, They don't want the judge. If you say to the judge the F word in the judge's face, the judge can punish you for criminal contempt. If it's not directly in the presence of the judge, a lot of times they appoint like a special prosecutor. So it's not you and the judge fighting, it's the special prosecutor fighting. But what you're fighting about is the fact that you were in criminal contempt of a judge's order. The judge told you, don't disseminate that stuff. You also sign a paper before you get it, agreeing that you will not disseminate it and that you're subject to punishment. So you do. And as I say, we lawyers have lots and lots of disagreements, but this is not one that people have a lot of disagreements about. You enter a case, you sign a protective order, you say you won't disseminate stuff, and then you ballyhoo to the world. Ha ha, I violated the order, I told everybody. She apparently has her own problems. So I think her argument is going to be she kind of needed this stuff. But it sounds like her best argument is that this is the kind of self-help that you're not entitled to. Go defend yourself, but not by coming into a case and getting secret documents and then, disseminating them. It sounds like she's just totally out of line on this.
Lastly, there's an antitrust case against Google. They're talking about splitting this company up, maybe taking Chrome this way, YouTube this way. I don't know. Is it possible to split up a company like Google? Is that what we're looking at? And what does that look like?
Sure, there would be ways to split up Google, and they would have, the one function that they do, but then they do a lot of self-dealing. That's the allegation, and so you would split them up in a way that they couldn't self-deal. And there are different functions that a company does, and the idea is that you would make one of them very competitive because you wouldn't allow Google to participate in that field, the field that they're trying to control. And a federal judge has looked at this, heard all the arguments of the facts and the law, and said Google is a monopolist and is using its monopoly power to suppress competition and to gouge the public and to gouge others for higher prices. And that's exactly what the antitrust laws are designed to not do. And, sometimes people think it's a Democratic issue, but the antitrust laws, the trust buster, was the famous Republican, Teddy Roosevelt. And the Republicans were into this. And the reason the Republicans were into this decade after decade is because small business gets crushed. You say 90% of small business people vote Republican. Well, this is a real Republican issue, not having the Googles of the world gouge them and knock their companies out of business. They really hurt small and middle-sized business. So this should be a bipartisan cause to do something. I mean, Google has 90% of the market. If that's not a monopoly position, 90% of the market, 90% of the people go on the internet through Google. And the reason is because they pay billions of dollars to Apple and other companies like that. So when you buy an Apple phone, you very easily search the internet by going on Google. And if you try to do it any other way, you have to really understand the phone and a lot more technology than people do. So by paying billions of dollars, they maintain this monopoly position. Why are they paying billions of dollars to Apple? Except that Apple puts them first and easy to get on the Apple devices.
So they're talking about maybe divesting the Android a part of the operation, divesting the Chrome part of the operation. So all these little things that make up Google, could they all be separated out?
Sure. I mean, they did that. They did that with the phone company, and
AT&T,
which had a monopoly.
Right? Yeah.
They did it with the phone company, which had a monopoly, and we've had this flourishing of technology. We've had all of these advances. The world that we live in now with these smartphones and everything else, I don't think that would have been possible if AT&T and the phone company had been able to maintain their monopoly. They were broken up, and everyone said at the time, the sky is falling, this will be awful, and it wasn't awful. It was a great improvement. And as I say, a judge decided this, a very serious judge, after hearing a lot of arguments about it. So I don't think people should think that the judge is all wet. I think they should think that Google and its arguments are all wet, and let's figure out how to make this more competitive for everyone's good, except Google's.
David Katz, our famous lawyer and our favorite lawyer, former federal prosecutor, now a defense attorney in Los Angeles. David Katz, I look forward to our visits every week.
It's great to be with you. You only leapfrogged around 8 topics. What's wrong, Kim?
I know.
You did 9.
I had a list and I got to everything. I'm feeling very good about it.
Okay. Always happy to be with you, Kim.
Bye, David Katz. Thank you so much. David Katz, everybody. I have one more surprise for you, and this is a great interview with author Pedro Domingos. He's written a satire this book about what would happen if an AI candidate ever ran for and then successfully became the president of the United States. Let's take a listen now. Here's Mark and
The
Pedro
Mark Thompson
Domingos.
Show. The Mark Thompson Show.
Put that coffee down.
Who's Mark Thompson?
Feels great.
When they raided Mar-a-Lago, God didn't like that.
I always am excited to be around big-brained people, and boy, we have such a person in the mix right this moment. This guy has so many awards when it comes to the world of computer science and machine learning and engineering. Has a new book which is funny, but it's satirical and plays very much to the reality of artificial intelligence. So I'm anxious to bring him on now. He is the professor, Pedro Domingos, everybody.
Hey.
Look at you, Professor. Congratulations on your latest. 2040 is the latest.
Yeah.
A Silicon Valley satire. It takes place in this world of AI and machine learning. And I'll get to the book in a second because the premise is really great. You know, what if an AI candidate ran for president? But first, I want to try to explore a little bit and just super briefly what you know about AI, because, you know, this is a luxury for us to be able to speak to someone who's so steeped in it as you are. So give me we've heard a lot of the downside of AI. We've heard how revolutionary it is, and you can see how revolutionary it is. We've also heard that, hey, 20% of the time it's wrong, and as it learns, there are mistakes made, and, if you turn over your medical file to such a thing, then the 20% mistakes that could be made with your medical life could kill you, etc. Can you give me some sense of the landscape right now?
So AI is progressing very rapidly, which is very exciting. And there are some things it can actually do already much better than humans, like medical diagnosis is an example. But it's also very limited in many ways. And in particular, it has no common sense. So ChatGPT is very good at fooling you into thinking that it understands what's going on, but it has no clue. And every now you get a glimpse of this, but this is part of what's dangerous with the current state of AI. Is people thinking that it's a lot better and more competent than it really is.
So it's the machine learning that we talk about is this frontier of it getting smarter without us having to do anything, sort of. Isn't that it?
Yes, machine learning, it's actually my specialty, has been since grad school, is really the linchpin of AI. We don't know how to program AI to drive a car or understand language or any of these things, but we can give it examples and it learns by looking at them, not unlike a child. The child playing is actually a lot like machine learning. So computers are learning now, and that's why they can do what they can do.
So left to their own devices with this machine learning capacity, are they able to begin to kind of do stuff on their own of a technical nature? Could you can turn over any number of complex tasks to them and they can learn it?
They can do an amazing number of things. In fact, the same learning algorithm can learn to drive a car or play chess or do medical diagnosis or recommend posts on Twitter or, an infinite number of things. So at the same time, the learning only works so well. We have a long way to go before the machine learning is as good as the human learning.
So that means that you need sort of a human in the lifeguard chair to kind of make sure that AI is learning it the proper way?
Paradoxically, machine learning is a highly labor-intensive enterprise. The opposite of what you think of when you think of AI, but it really takes a lot of very high people to every step of the way to figure out just how to make a learning algorithm that works, because often they just don't work at all. and then how to get the data, right? The data that you learn from, like the experience of a human being, is really crucial. You give it the wrong data and it doesn't learn anything useful or anything good, all the way to then deploying it, figuring out, because things can go wrong all the time. So machine learning takes a lot of hand-holding, and the people who know how to do the hand-holding are very in demand these days.
Yeah, isn't it true? It's weird because you think of AI, sadly, in one way, as replacing human beings in a number of different ways in many jobs. But just to hear you talk about it, yeah, but you actually need more human beings to bring AI to its potential, is kind of what you're saying.
Oh, yeah. I mean, in fact, AI is no different from previous forms of automation in that it replaces some things that humans do, but actually creates demand for others. So actually, you wind up with more jobs at the end of the day than you had before.
The problem is, or when problem conceptually, meaning that just to kind of understand the vastness of it, one of the problems is that it's doing so much right now. For example, today somebody just showed me the AI voice. I guess it's a I don't know if it's to call it a bot or what to call it, but essentially it can take a voice sample, and then it can apply it to a piece of copy and actually double the voice.
Oh, absolutely. And it can do more than that. It can synthesize your image in live video. For example, there's a machine learning AI generated debate between Trump and Biden that is actually pretty realistic. There's a few glitches, but we'll get over those pretty soon.
Yeah, no, that's it's so you have that coexisting with, as you've suggested, sort of being able to cull medical records for diagnoses and prognoses, and you just see the vastness of what AI can do. And so to your story, this story is a satire on one level of what could happen in 2040 if an AI were to be involved in the political forum. Maybe you can take us through what actually the plan would be, at least the plot points. But in a way, it feels as though AI is already entering the political sphere, in that a lot of the gaming out of political strategies is being done in AI kind of way. There's a lot of heavy lifting really associated with the ground games, exactly where you can get out vote, where there might still be room to, and a lot of AI is being employed in that, from what I understand. But this takes that to another level.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, the basic story of the book is that ChatGPT runs for president. And of course, the jokes now write themselves, right, about AI and politics and the tech industry and all of these things. But as you say, in fact, here's one of the most common reactions I get from people is like, wow, this is so far out, so over the top, and yet it's solidly realistic, like it could almost be happening now. And to your point, AI already pervades politics to a degree that most people don't realize. AI is used for targeting, right? No candidate right now, will survive without doing the same thing that companies do, which is that mine data about you to figure out. The big pioneer of this was Obama in 2012. And it's used extensively. It's ironic because politicians talk a good game about privacy, but when it comes to their campaigns, that goes out the window.
So in that regard, you're talking about data mining, sort of, aren't you?
Yeah, it's like going to to your social media data, everything that's public about you. A lot of companies collect data about us, and then they will sell it to you by, at 50 cents a person. And so the companies will collect all this data. And for example, what Obama's campaign did when they kind of like pioneered this was they would try to predict every day who were the most likely swing voters in swing states that by a visit could be persuaded to change, and what were the talking points. So they ran this thing every night. I mean, very reminiscent of what happens in 2040. They run this thing called the optimizer to figure out who the campaign workers should go talk to the following day. And, he beat Mitt Romney that way.
That's exactly right. And that, by the way, seems like ancient history compared to the capacity of AI today, It's funny, in Wired magazine, Stephen Levy says, fun and well-written will be a hit. The most devastating satires are written by those who know the absurdities up close. Pedro Domingos is deeply familiar with both AI and the follies of its followers, and he's funnier than ChatGPT's hallucinations. So, you take this idea of, again, stuff that does exist in real life, the political utility of AI, and now you apply it to this notion of, well, what if you turn AI loose? And now in the story, do those who are voting for AI, the potential voters, know they're voting for AI, or is there a human kind of decoy that's out in front?
Oh, they totally know. And in fact, the whole, so the guy is called PreziBot, the presidential chatbot, the presidential robot. and his whole campaign, or its whole campaign, is humans are incompetent, thinking is hard. The chairman of the Fed is already an AI. The president obviously should be an AI. Let's get the incompetent humans out of this loop. And then, of course, things don't go as planned. But there is a set of humans in the book called the Prezi heads, who are people who really do think that AI is salvation, and those people exist.
Oh, that's really just great. That's really just great. By the way, within the AI community, is there that group that feels like, hey, guys, get out of the way, this really is the future? Or does everybody kind of know AI has its place?
Oh, within the AI community, there is the full spectrum, from people who think AI is the second coming of the Messiah to people who are, increasingly numerous these days, who think AI is the looming catastrophe. And in fact, part of my intent in this book is to have fun, but part of it is like to really show people what the world of AI and tech really is like, to demystify it. People think there's these geniuses solving problems and having brilliant ideas, and it's more like a bunch of, bumbling fools with their human foibles, trying things and making mistakes, and then things blow up, of course, as they always do.
Now, there is an AI presence in this world of politics already, isn't there, Pedro?
Well, there are. A number
we mentioned the data mining, but I'm talking about the absurdist thing. I'm just looking at my notes, for example, that the synthetic party, an AI ran for mayor in Tokyo. Is this? This is real, right? This year, an AI ran for mayor in Wyoming. These are real things, correct? Not just out of our story.
No, this is mind-boggling, but it's true. And in fact, I decided I had to hurry up and publish this book before it was outdated. Yes, an AI ran for mayor in Tokyo and placed third. And there's an AI running, for mayor of Wyoming right now. And various others like this. An AI ran against Putin a few years ago. There's the synthetic party, et cetera, et cetera. Now, typically, an AI is not legally allowed to run for president right now, but the way they get around it is that a human runs, for example, for mayor, as a representative of the AI. And what they say is, I'm just going to do what the AI says, right? Imagine, Joe Biden or Donald Trump or whoever saying, I'm the constitutional monarch, right? I'm like the Queen of England. I will do the PR, but the decisions are safer in the hands of an AI. Of course, they're not, but that's the fun part.
It oddly, in the case of Trump, that might just be half a beat off of what's actually happening. I'll be on the golf course. Tell me what photo op I need to hit next.
What gave me the idea for this book, by the way? So I for a long time I wanted, I thought somebody should write a novel about Silicon Valley. Finally decided to. What gave me the idea was a journalist asked me, after a talk that that involved a lot of AI in politics, so would you vote for an AI for president? And I was a little taken aback, and I thought for a while, and I said, well, no, but if the other candidate was Trump, then yes. So, if the human candidates are bad enough, then the AI, for all its limitations, start to look
well,
like...
I'd vote for a ham sandwich if the other candidate's Trump. So I don't know, but anyway, I take your point. Look, I just love this idea, and clearly the entire community of engineers and computer heads have also embraced it, in addition to the literary community. So in 2040, an AI candidate running for president, could it happen? It's told in a funny and also a well-researched way, because Pedro Domingos, this is his world. So we're going to have a link to the book underneath this conversation that people are watching right now. And I'm looking forward to hearing good things from you. Will you come back and visit again, and we can talk AI and anything else you're working on?
Of course. Once an AI is president, I can come back and analyze what's going to happen with it.
Put the website up there again, will you please, Kevin? The website again is 2040novel.com. 2040novel.com. Again, the book is 2040. So 2040novel.com. Again, Pedro Domingos, the author of 2040, a Silicon Valley satire. Pedro Domingos, it was a pleasure to meet you, and I look forward to the next time. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on the show. Anytime.
Okay, my friend. So long.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Such a fun interview. Our thanks to Pedro Domingos, to David Katz for coming on the show today, as well as Bob Christian, the candidate for the House seat in Georgia. Do want to talk to you a little bit about the end of summer meetup. This is going to be really fun. It's 2 hours, and it's so good to see people. Everyone we're getting to know in the chat. Well, not everyone, because there's a very limited number of spots. 25 people will be coming, and it's really good to spend time together. It is on August 29th. It's our end of summer virtual meetup, 6:30 to 8:30 p.m., August 29th. Come and visit with us. Tony's going to be there, right, Tony? Yeah, we got Albert.
Oh, yeah. I'll be
you
there.
Could be there. You got
like
Mark.
Someone has to engineer it right.
That's exactly. You know it. I may swing by. We'll have a lot of special guests coming by as well. So here's how it works. To lock up one of these 25 spots, which go really fast, make a $50 donation through the PayPal link, which you'll find at themarkthompsonshow.com. And then write in the little box where you can write text, write meetup in the comment section on your PayPal contribution. And then it's a two-step process because you've got to send us an email at mtsmeetup@gmail.com telling us that you just sent the $50 in and you'd like to come to the meetup. And then we'll have two lists and we'll make sure no one gets left out. Again, it is the end of summer meetup. We'll really hope that I get to see you there. It is the end of the show, and I do have to thank people who have come in. I have been remiss in not thanking the folks that have swooped in with contributions, and that includes No Contendo coming in with a $2 contribution, saying Perry to the EPA was the first time Trump gutted the EPA. Okay, No Contendo also wants to tell us that Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Texas, Louisiana, North Carolina, Mississippi, the GOP diluting the black vote. The Supreme Court overturned several of these maps. See Roland Martin, Unfiltered, and Brian Tyler Cohen with Mark Elias. So interesting that you mentioned Brian Tyler Cohen, because I think he's going to be here on the Mark Thompson Show tomorrow.
We might
yes,
have him tomorrow with
That's
Mark.
right. That may be the way we start the show tomorrow with Brian Tyler Cohen. So stay tuned for that. Huge thank you also to West Theory coming in with $5. That's it. We'll meet you at the after party live next.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Have a great day, everybody.